Now obviously Terraria is a sandbox game, so use whatever weapons you want to use. The purpose of this video is to show the best weapons to use to easily get past each point of progression, and so you can brag to your friends about having the best weapon, because a YouTuber said it was the best, and you should always take what YouTubers say at face value. I tested every weapon with gear that I assume most people would have at each point, except for the final category, which shows the best weapons regardless of class. The Amazon topped my list the first time, but this time it comes second to the Thorn Chakram. The Chakram did slightly better than the Amazon, but has a big use time penalty if you miss. Even though the Sun Fury was nerfed at 1.4.1, it's still the best weapon to use against the Wall of Flesh due to its high damage and good range. I disregarded the Flamerang the first time since I don't remember ever using it, but its damage against a single target is much better than the Sun Fury's. And again, a Boomerang makes it to the top 2. The Banana Rang is the best weapon at this point for melee. Its high damage, range, and fire rate are excellent for all 3 mechs. But if you don't want a weapon that takes forever to get to max power, the Shadow Flame Knife has almost as much DPS and is much less tedious to get. With its debuff and bounce mechanic, it's especially effective against the Destroyer and Skeletron Prime. Red's Throw has the highest DPS at this point, but it's too rare to reasonably obtain. So excluding that, the true Knight's Edge is the best weapon used against Plantera, having high damage and the potential to deal even more if you get really close. The Death Sickle is also a great weapon to use because of its high pierce and projectile longevity. Unsurprisingly, the Terrorblade is the best weapon to use against Golem. Its high damage and attack speed are extremely effective against pretty much everything. There really isn't any reason to use anything else, except the Vampire Knives if you're too lazy to dodge. The best weapon against the Moonlord is still the Daybreak, with its extremely high range and damage output. If you want a weapon that's more difficult to get and does less DPS, then get the Flying Dragon, the second best at this point. I guess it would make the Cultist and Pillars easier, but there really isn't any reason to get something other than the Daybreak. And of course, the Zenith is the most powerful melee weapon, and might be the most powerful weapon in the game. I'm glad they nerfed the quad barrel shotgun. That weapon cost the same as a mini shark, but had double the damage potential. And that makes the mini shark number 1 again for pre-boss, with its high fire rate and decent damage. If you don't feel like getting 30 plus gold, the boomstick does almost as well as the mini shark. The Molten Fury and Hellwing Bow are still the top 2 pre-hard mode ranged weapons. The Molten Fury usually having higher damage if you aim well, and the Hellwing Bow being good for its high rate of fire. They finally nerfed the Daedalus Storm Bow, but it's still the best ranged weapon to use against the mech bosses. Careful though, as the Daedalus shoots holy, unholy, hellfire, and jester arrows slower than all other arrow types. The Onyx Blaster is the next best, but takes longer to get and does less damage. If you're playing by yourself, then you probably have a lot of extra fallen stars that you don't need, which can be used in the best weapon Pre-Plantera, the Super Star Shooter. If you don't have fallen stars for whatever reason, the Mega Shark and Chlorophyte Shotbow are the next best options, both dealing very similar DPS to each other. Although you probably won't need this video if you plan to get these 2 weapons, the Eventide is the best to use, with the Snowman Cannon close behind, but I would recommend the Stake Launcher, since it isn't too difficult to get and does a good amount of damage to Golem. The Phantasm is easily the best weapon to use against Moonlord, with its super easy crafting recipe and high damage output. The Electrosphere Launcher does almost as much damage as the Phantasm, with the mini nukes added in 1.4, but it doesn't auto-fire. For all the ranged weapons in the game, the Celebration Mark II is the best, having the highest DPS and even homing capabilities. Before I get into Mage and Summoner, I'm not going to include the Zapinators and the Terra Prisma. Since you can technically get the Terra Prisma pre-Golem, it would make this video less interesting if I just said it was the best for the last 3 sections. And for the Zapinators, there is an incredibly small chance that they can deal more than 40,000 damage in a hit, instantly killing most bosses. For the Zapinators, I just tested them multiple times and took the average time it took to kill the boss. Alright, the Grey Zapinator is first, even with its average damage, and has potential to be much greater. But if there isn't a traveling merchant willing to sell you one, then the Diamond or Amber staves are your next best option, both of which have good damage and pierce. Even after the nerf, the Flame Lash is still the best magic weapon to use in Pre-Hard Mode, since its high damage combined with its pierce makes it excellent against the Wall of Flesh. The Demon Scythe is the next best option, having good damage and pierce as well, but is more difficult to aim. In my original videos, I somehow neglected to test the best weapon at this stage, the Cursed Flames. Decent damage, good pierce and projectile longevity, and a powerful debuff make it an excellent weapon. The Skyfracture and Crystal Serpent are still second and third though, with similar damage but slower fire rate. The Venom Staff is finally a good weapon after the way piercing projectiles were changed. Before the piercing change, the Venom Staff would usually only hit once per attack on a single target, but now it hits several times per attack. So it now has high enough damage to defeat Plantera and its tentacles at the same time. The Rainbow Rod still does well against Plantera and is a good option if you've already got the materials to make it. Pretty much any magic weapon you get after Plantera will be enough to defeat Golem, but the best one available is the Bubble Gun, with its decent damage and high fire rate. If you don't want to fight Fishron, however, the Razor Pine is an excellent option as well, also having high fire rate, but lower damage. The Nebula Arcanum may take a lot of mana, but its homing ability and massive damage output more than make up for it. Not only does it hit the target multiple times, but it explodes, dealing a lot of extra damage, and releases even more projectiles with short range but still high damage. The only downside is the slow projectile speed, which the Nebula Blaze does not have. The Nebula Blaze homes in on enemies and has significantly lower mana cost with very fast projectile speeds, but only hits once, making it useful only if you can't hit something with the Arcanum. And again, unsurprisingly, the last Prism is the most powerful magic weapon. Summoner is all around a high damage class now, except for pre-boss. Summoner can do a bit more damage now that the Flink Staff was added, but it does just barely more damage than the Vampire Frog Staff. With the help of the Snapthorn, it doesn't really matter at this point which summon you have, just make sure you have one. Pre-Hard Mode is made a lot less troublesome with the addition of the whips. The Spinal Tap added in 1.4.1 being the best at this point with its higher damage against several targets, like the Hungry. Both the Hornet and Imp Staff have similar damage output, with the Imp Staff's pierce being useful against several enemies. Both the Cool Whip and the Firecracker are good at this point. The Cool Whip being better if you have more summon damage, and the Firecracker being better if you have faster melee speed. The Sanguine Staff is the best by far against mech bosses, as it never misses and does a lot of damage. The Durandal is better than both previous whips with the attack speed buff you get from hitting enemies. And even after the piercing change, the Sanguine Staff still does plenty more DPS than any other at this point. The Kaleidoscope is the best whip in the game, and you can get it right after Plantera. But the Dark Harvest still does high damage and is extremely powerful when effectively combined with the Kaleidoscope. The Desert Tiger Staff is now the best summon weapon to use after its buff in 1.4.1, dealing high damage with good accuracy. If you somehow can't find a Desert Key though, the Raven Staff is your next best option. The Stardust Dragon Staff used to be and might still be the most popular summon weapon, dealing high damage and being a really cool dragon. However, for certain enemies that move very quickly, like Fishron and the Empress of Light, the Stardust Cell Staff does more damage more often. The best summon weapon in the game is obviously the Terra Prisma. Insanely high damage and accuracy just make it so much better than every other single summon weapon. Now for the best weapons overall for each progression point. The way I tested the weapons was with gear that increases damage output by as much as possible. The ZAPINATOR and Terra Prisma are still banned from this list. Pre-boss, before you even kill King Slime, the Mini Shark is the best. Its extremely high fire rate for when you can get it, combined with Silver Bullet's high damage, makes it shred the Eye of Cthulhu. For all of Pre-Hard Mode, you might think something like the Flame Lash or Sun Fury, both being extremely good weapons, but it's actually the Spinal Tap with the Hornet Staff. The Obsidian Armor's set bonus was changed in 1.4.1 to increase whip speed and range by 50%, absolutely demolishing anything that comes near you. Then before the mech bosses, even after its nerf, the Daedalus Stormbow is still the most powerful weapon at this point. Combined with Ichor arrows, plenty of magic quivers, and an archery potion, the Daedalus Stormbow makes destroying the mech bosses easier than building an NPC hotel for the 100th time. 1.4.1 made a lot of changes. It also made the True Knight's Edge the most powerful and reasonably obtainable weapon pre-Plantera. Now that the projectile does 50% more damage, and you don't have to hope RNG will give you the broken hero sword you used to need, Plantera isn't nearly as much of a problem for melee-based characters. Well, it never was really, but even more so now. Golem is by far the easiest boss, and you might say, "Well, good sir, I do believe King Slime has comparatively less health and damage to a very large degree." First of all, what century did you come from? Secondly, I'm talking about progression difficulty, not how difficult each boss would be if I had Endgame or even Pre-Golem gear. Well, that doesn't even matter. Summoner is the best class at this point. Combining the Obsidian Armor's set bonus with both the Kaleidoscope and Dark Harvest, the minion used barely matters. The combination of several melee speed accessories, the Dark Harvest buff, the Obsidian Armor bonus, and a bit of damage from a minion like the Raven Staff can destroy Golem in less than 15 seconds if done well. And Summoner still reigns supreme, with the Stardust Dragon Staff being the most powerful weapon at this point. The most powerful weapon in all of Terraria would be an interesting thought, if not for the existence of the Zenith. It has infinite pierce and theoretically infinite range. The wiki even says it can take down the Moonlord in 11 seconds on Master Mode, and it literally allows you to reach the zenith of your power in Terraria. This video took a while to make, so I hope you enjoyed. Subscribing would also increase the rate and quality of my uploads, so do that if you're interested. If you want to see something in particular, just comment it. If it sounds interesting enough, I'll make a video on it, or something similar. Anyways, bye!